Yo, 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 it is Sound Advice, the episode which I do not know the number for. So we're just going to call it the future of DIY audio and the future of sound advice. It's me, your boy, HifiVega, joined, as always, by the guy on this side, the DIY audio guy.
What is happening, Rob?
Yo, what's up? And Toyd, a.k.a. Nick.
What is going on, guys? Looking forward to doing another episode with you guys.
So should we start off with the good stuff, or should we just get straight into it?
Depends. How many people are watching?
Yeah.
Well, either way, it's going to have to be probably announced more than once. So go ahead and do it now first.
Okay, so.
Rip the Band-Aid.
Yeah, if you guys seen the thumbnail, it said HifiVega is leaving Sound Advice. So that was not clickbait. HifiVega is leaving Sound Advice, but not immediately. So I'm going to do this show, and then I'm going to do the rotation back into my show, and that will be my last official host or one of the hosts as Sound Advice. But that doesn't mean I won't be back on here. I'll just be on as a guest, and this show will get turned over to Nick and Justin, who have very capable hands. And, I might show up to do a challenge or two again. Who knows what the future holds, but yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely sad to see Hi-Fi go, but man, he is doing so many live shows. It's just insane. He needs time for himself, his family, and everyone else. And you know what I said? Parts Express gives him the victory and the trophy, and he said, "I'm going out on a high note."
That's how you got to do it, man. If I've learned anything, that's what you just leave when the chips are in your favor. Always.
No, you played out.
All right. And so that being said, go ahead, Justin.
And the thing to remember here is it's all good. There's not like some fight behind the scenes. There's not any drama. The reality is that Rob live streams. And I just saw in the chat, Kip has invited him on the Kicker Show tomorrow night again. So Rob live streams 4 out of 5 weekday nights. And that's killer, y'all. That's a lot of work. And I don't know how he's managed to do it this long, to be honest with you.
Honestly, the truth is we found some old tweets of his. We didn't like them. And now he's gone.
Oh, you guys Disney'd me.
Yeah, we Disneyed you.
You totally Disneyed me. Oh, no.
Wait, we Disneyed you? I'm sorry. What does that mean?
Well,
the Mandalorian.
They keep firing all the people.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
like they did
fired
with Cara Dune.
And the guy before him, Guardians of the Galaxy guy.
Oh, yeah, the Gunn, James Gunn?
But then they brought him back.
Right, they brought him back. Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that did that. So now we're just saying,
just Disney. Dude,
I didn't realize it was now calling.
I got to turn this light down.
Hey, go for it, man. I didn't realize it was now a thing. Disneying someone was a thing. I don't know. I kind of watched The Mandalorian was because of Cara Dune. So now there's no point in watching it anymore.
Yeah.
We are all for that, Kip. Kip said he wants to get me and Justin on an unmasked show, and we would. I mean, I'm speaking for both of us, but I'm sure you're agree with me, right?
I'd be thrilled to, and it would be a real trip. I think about kicker. I remember being a kid and people had kickers, and I didn't have kickers because I couldn't afford kickers.
Right? It's true. Kickers back in the day were wow.
Yeah, I need to go order some kickers. That dark cone with the gold lettering. I just watching those woofers move in the trunks of friends' cars. I always have a fondness in my heart for kicker because it was the original car audio subwoofer, and the opportunity to be on Kicker's show would be fantastic. Yeah, y'all make good stuff, and you've been making good stuff for a long time.
Oh yeah,
yeah, we would definitely do that in a heartbeat. All right,
absolutely.
So what are we talking about today? The future of so I guess we've already started talking about the future of DIY audio. It's unfortunately on Sound Advice not going to include HifiVega, but what are we doing? What do you guys think?
We should talk a little bit more about the future of Sound Advice. And the reality is that we haven't talked that much behind the scenes about it. Rob let us know that he could keep going live streaming 4 nights a week or 4 nights in a row. And we haven't decided for sure if we want to invite someone else on to co-host. who that person would be if we want to do like a guest every week or whatever the case may be. And so I guess if we're talking about the future of this show right here, we might be taking auditions.
Yeah. Who knows? If you guys are interested, who knows? I mean, we really, like he said, we haven't, Hi-Fi just sprung it on us. It felt like, when you're in high school and that girl's breaking up with you and you're like, what's going on? We had that feeling there for a second. Then we all cried, hugged it out, and said we'd all be friends, which means we're never going to talk again. So
that never happened to me in high school.
It never happened to you? You didn't have a girlfriend?
Never. There were no girls interested in me.
Oh, okay.
That's an experience I never had in high school.
Oh, geez.
Oh, man. Yeah, but I will be back on, but just as a guest.
But never for a competition because you'll win.
Well, technically, you won. I came in as the people's champ, but really, you were the people's champ. I just turned up to be Chris's champ. That's
true. And Parts Express actually created a flyer with.
Oh, I should have brought that up.
Yeah, with his boombox on it, showing it off. So, telling you, he went out on top. He's like, you know what? Thanks for the advertisement, Parts Express. I'm gone.
Yeah, I took my master's green jacket, and I was like, "Yep, this is good enough. I've accomplished what I set to accomplish here. I'm out.
I'm out of here."
Out of here. Big D style. All right, so Nick, the future of DIY audio. What's up? What do you got anything?
So here's
jumps out to you.
Here's the deal. To a certain degree, it gets concerning about DIY audio, right? Well, here's the reason why I say that. Products are getting cheap. Now, I wouldn't say good products are getting cheap, but a lot of products are getting cheap. And what I mean by that is mass-produced, already made products, right? And so there's always a concern that because when DIY is usually good is one of two reasons. Is when either the quality is just so terrible that you want to make it yourself, and then there's a certain amount of people to do that, or it's so expensive and out of your reach that you feel like, all right, I want to try to make that myself. I feel like those are the two main reasons a lot of people get into DIY. So one of my concerns with the future of DIY is, with things getting so less expensive and everything getting like audio getting compressed so much that to a certain degree, that can hurt the DIY community.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you make something more available and more, just at ready for people to purchase, they're less likely to seek out something, or trying to reach some kind of goal, a high-end goal with cheaper stuff when they can get something pretty good or 80% of the way for 20% of the price of something really nice. So that definitely can hurt them.
So I want to mention this, Jim D, if you don't mind me saying this. Jim D said, "Hey, Nick, I just wanted to thank you for the recommendation of the Dayton Audio Subwoofer DSP, which is a DSP-LF. Fantastic product." He said, "It's the best $60 I ever spent on my home system. My sub is so much more musical and less boomy than ever before. Thanks." And that's something I don't know if I want to talk about right now, but just DSP in general is going to be, I think, huge for DIY. And I know that's something we all want to talk about eventually. But Jim D, first of all, thank you for saying that to me. And I'm so glad that it's working out for you. I know it worked out really well for me as well.
Unless you're an Android guy, and then it doesn't work at all.
Yeah. Or it does. You just can't auto-tune it, huh?
Yeah, you have to have a measurement mic for that. Yeah. Well, but you know what, though? I do think that cheap DSPs are becoming that's really great for DIY audio, whether it be the car. I mean, we've talked about it before, the Kicker Key, right? Which does it for, for your car audio, or whether it be the Dayton DSP 408 or the DSP LF or the mini DSP. And DSPing is becoming, much more readily available.
Yeah, it's definitely attainable in car audio more now than it has ever been. At the beginning of it, you were looking at least $500 to get yourself into some kind of DSP situation. And I think the tide started to turn with the Pioneer 80PRS, which had a lot of features built in. It's not a full DSP, but it's a DSP light or something I would call it. And then, of course, the Dayton DSP came out. Just before that, the mini DSP 2x4 was available for about $105. So those two kind of ushered in the under $200 DSP in-home and car. Both of them can be used either way.
And now that you can get the mini DSP with Dirac that's unbelievable. I mean, you used to not be able to really get your hands on that. So that's another fantastic product that you can get. That's a lot more expensive than the ones we're talking about, but still.
You mentioned the ADPRS, and the cool thing that the ADPRS can do, and other Pioneer car head units can do the same thing, is they can do that active system completely, and I call it matrix mode or something, don't they, instead of standard mode? Is that right, Rob? I forget what they call it. They got a name for it.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
But you go in, you set it up, and you can set it up to run tweeters and mid ranges and subwoofer, and you've got a full 6-channel DSP. And the really cool part about it, my understanding, is it has right and left equalizers.
That's the most important part of
right.
80PRS, yeah.
And most other head units, though, because pretty much all the Alpine head units, it doesn't quite go that far, but it gets really close. And most Alpine head units, even the basic ones, have got time alignment. They've got parametric equalizers. So they've got a full spectrum parametric where you can adjust the width of the band in addition to the boost and the location. And that's been around for a long time on Alpines. And if the Alpine had the single channel control, right control, left control, it would be probably a better device than the ADPRS. Of course, ADPRS, you can do a 3-way, and that's a little bit different, of course.
Well, and another great DSP alternative that's coming out now is both Shure amplifier and Dayton Audio have the little, I don't even remember what they're called, but they're little DSP boards, and they actually use Sigma Studios. And they have RCA out on them. And Sigma Studios is a very powerful program. Now, having said that, it's extremely complicated for someone that's never done DSP work before. It's going to be hard for you to figure out. But if you can figure it out, it's a very, very powerful program. And to see that you get that for $50 or something, and hook it up to your amplifier, whatever. And they have some with them built in to the amplifiers too, depending on what you want to do.
Well, the Ehrlich Wi-Fi boards.
Oh, right?
You pay $10. Yeah, you pay $10 and you can buy the module or whatever. It's a software license, I think it is, and that entire system can be DSP'd.
Yeah, and that software is good for your computer. So,
right,
it's not for a board, which is awesome. Because most people think, well, I have to pay it every time I buy a board. No, you only have to buy it once. And if you buy 10 boards or 20 boards, especially if you're DIY and selling, that's a really good thing, because then you have that, and then you can program your board. You can save a profile and reprogram it and set it right in there. And same with the Dayton Audio and Shure amplifier board. Same thing. You can save the profile and then just upload it to your new one.
Yeah, my question though is, if you're DIY and selling, haven't you crossed the threshold beyond DIY, and aren't you into something different?
I don't know. I guess that depends on. To me, it depends on how many you're selling and who you're selling to, like who your target market is. Like if you're doing like one-offs for people and building them custom, then I would still consider that more DIY than it would be, commercial sales. But if you're selling 30,000, I consider that more commercial. But I see what you're coming at. I see where you're coming from. I mean, I could see you saying that's not DIY anymore.
Well, I'm curious, in home audio, it seems like DSPs are mainly used for subs.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of active setups, so you're probably not using time alignment or crossovers mostly.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. That's a good point.
Yeah.
You are using time alignment, but it's for the speaker, not so the speaker itself already is passive, so it should have all that, if assuming that it's done correctly, should have that all built in well already. So then typically when you buy a new home theater receiver, it has what we call room EQ on it. Now it depends on, what receiver you get depends on what room EQ you get, but it equalizes the term. So it'll set the distances, it'll set the levels, it'll set the delays, it'll do all that for you. And it'll also, depending on which one you have, DSP it to set the frequency response, or EQ it basically for you. But most people will do DSP, like you said, only on their subwoofer, because a lot of those amplifiers don't do that or don't do a good job with your subwoofers.
So Rob, yeah, I know you're still rocking the sound bar, but my older Denon home theater receiver, it came with, I think Odyssey is the branding. It came with a setup microphone. You plug the microphone in, you go into some settings, you hit a button, and it does something similar to what the Kicker Key does. Not as advanced, I don't think, because there's no EQ in it, but it will set the crossover. It'll detect the size of your speakers, and so if you've got large right and left front speakers, it will set those to, you know, a lower crossover point, more full range, as opposed to something like 100 or 80 hertz or something like that.
Yeah, in Odyssey, there's different versions of Odyssey. So some Odysseys will EQ, some will not. It all depends on what is, like, there's entry level and then there's the higher up, and you know that really just depends on what you're doing. I'm wondering about the future of DIY as far as like cabling goes, because I'm wondering, you know, do you think now that there's so much more science on, hey, maybe, you know, spending X amount of money for cabling isn't in your best interest, do you think that maybe more people will DIY their own cables?
I doubt it, because most people just don't want to go through the work. Even though, you know, if you got a quality cable and you throw some Tech Flex on it, some ferrules or bananas plugs and some heat shrink, you're right there. You're right there with the, you know, whatever it may be, blue jean set of $75 6-foot speaker wires.
Well, I think about like the homemade RCAs. Gosh, the hassle of putting the RCA on the end is not worth the trouble.
I like making homemade RCAs, and I like making homemade speaker wire. And one of the things why I like about it is because you can make it whatever length you need, right? Like I hate having like 8 feet. I only need 3 feet. Or when I have a 3-foot cable and I need 5 feet, I'm like, oh, you know, it just makes it easy. I put for my Atmos speakers in the ceiling, I put a wall plate near there, and I have that Tech Flex and homemade speaker watch going straight to the receiver. It looks great, sounds good. It's 10 gauge. I didn't have to spend $3 million on it. I think I spent like 60 or 80 on the spool of wire and Tech Flex and everything else. So, you know, probably $100 all in. But, you know, now I have all the cables set up, which is nice.
You could have just spent that on one pair of RCAs. The one thing I don't like about the DIY RCAs is you cannot find the good ends for sale. The ones that I like, they're very hard. You can find sometimes, but they're expensive a lot of times, and they're hard to find in general.
I like what SFFV says, you know, especially for home audio. You know, you can use you can make your own RCA cables just using coax, and it's pretty simple.
Yeah, definitely don't do that in car though.
Yeah, you said there's a shielding problem with that, right?
Yeah, you want a twisted pair. And a coax, you're more susceptible to noise, even though it's not that simple, because it depends on some amps use different type of inputs where a coax cable would be better on RCA, like for sound quality, but you're still going to have the interference problem. So, yeah.
It is a very inexpensive way to make long RCA cables, though, especially. Like if you need to go in wall and you can get something that's rated in wall coax cable, you know, to run it from one side of your house to the other, it's a real cheap way to do it too.
You know, when I think about the future of DIY, I sometimes like to think about the past and what are some technologies that maybe should have taken off but didn't, and why did they not take off? And the first thing that pops my mind.
DVD. Oh no.
When I think about cables, you know, Toslink, right? The optical cable, the fiber optic cable, but that just didn't go anywhere. It really didn't. I mean, HDMI came along, completely displaced it in the home, and you know, you still can find Toslink connectors here and there, and there are a few high end in car audio. But like, Rob, what's the deal? How come Toslink hasn't taken off?
I guess Because in home audio, HDMI just took over. It just seems like the simplest answer because Toslink was all audio. And in cars, it's still around in cars. You can get DSPs with a Toslink connection and have an all digital signal. It's actually really nice, but it's expensive. And I just think they didn't push it. Just we could have used, some kind of 3-pin XLR cable for connection versus twisted RCAs. And I think that would have been better overall because they lock in. You don't have to mess with ends or accidentally ripping out terminals from amps with tight monster cable RCAs. It's just, I don't know why. I guess because there's so much vested interest in selling car audio RCAs. Maybe the reason for car audio.
Yeah, and I think Toslink. I thought Toslink did a pretty good job, but it depended on when you started it, right? Like Toslink really started when we're talking about fiber optic for those who aren't interested, who don't know Toslink. It really started like PlayStation 2 DVD era. And if you were into Dolby Digital at those times, you used it. I think the problem was a lot of people didn't switch over to Dolby Digital, didn't realize that they needed, a digital connection of a fiber optic or a digital coax. And so they were still using stereo RCAs. I remember one of my friends built this amazing home theater. I come to look at how it was hooked up with RCA stereo the whole time. Had no idea it was hooked up wrong. And I think it got confusing. And I think the switch to HDMI was so smart because it just takes let's just say the knowledge factor out of it.
Yo, Scott Powerhog, what's up, man? Welcome.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that super chat.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Power Hog Audio there in Atlanta. Speaking of that,
what? Go ahead.
I might have missed it. Did you get that video out? Did I miss it?
Which one?
On the amplifier?
No. He's actually got a revision coming out of that amp. So we're gonna wait and do that one. I figured if there's gonna be a revision, why even waste time on the first?
No, I think you're right.
Video. Just wait on the revision and do that one.
I think that's very smart.
Yeah. So, what did you guys have anything else like in speaker building in general? Is there any trends that you'd like to see come to DIY?
I feel like trends go up and down, right? I mean, like if you take a look at it, like even with clothing, the clothing that was good in the 80s is now back in style, sort of, depending on what age group you're in. And it's just weird. And I feel like that's the same way with audio right now. Back in like the 70s and 80s is all about these big woofers and big bass and mid-range, And I feel like it's, and then we got the Bose era where we're like, oh, these tiny cubes. We're like, ooh, look at these tiny cubes. Look how much sound I get. I feel like we're going away from those tiny cubes and back into those big speaker era again. Especially if you take a look at subwoofers. I feel like subwoofers in general are going to the much bigger, much more excursion, trying to fill your room with more bass. That's one trend I've noticed, at least.
That's a good thing. I mean, tiny subwoofers are a waste of time and energy. They're cool to have around, but if you want bass, it takes space. It takes cone area. It takes a large box. It takes a big port. There's just no way around that. It's just the physics of it.
But people with the bigger woofers are getting smart now. So back in the day when we saw those big woofers, I mean, first of all, we should realize that, there was a time where when people were building speakers DIY and stuff that, TS specs and stuff were kind of not really being used as far as getting a box. Who knew if you were doing it right or not right? And that's all changed now. And now you're getting to the point where people are getting smart. They're buying these big woofers and they're doing something like I did where they built it into an end table, where they build it into their furniture where people don't even notice it there. Because you still need an end table, right? Like you're going to need an end table. So if you want an end table, you want a big subwoofer, be smart about it. Build it into it. And I like seeing those trends in DIY too, because I feel like DIY is starting to trend that way, like hidden sound, where you still have the sound, but it's not necessarily seen. It's like children, seen, not heard, right? Is that what they say?
So I think about the subwoofer in the car, and it seemed like there for a while in the kind of early 2000s, fiberglass was extremely trendy. And not just, fiberglassing into a cavity or something like that so you can get a woofer into a weird shape, but actually doing that thing that always seemed to look bad, look like a volcano. And you got those fiberglass domes that pop up with the woofer sitting in the middle of it. And that doesn't seem to be too trendy at the moment. Nowadays, if you want an oddball shape, you want to do that stacked fab thing. So I don't know, is fiberglass ever going to come back, or has stacked fab replaced it?
I think fiberglass will come back, but it's just not going to be like it was before. The stack, I think it's just a change in overall culture of install, because you see a lot more clean installs, like something that Dean would do, at 5-star. You see a lot more of that than what we used to see back in the day with a ton of trim panels.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So instead of hiding everything behind beauty panels, you just make it look good to begin with, and you don't have to.
Right.
Which is definitely plausible to do that. I mean, it's smart to do that. I mean, even AJC asked, what's our opinions on in-wall speakers going with the hidden thing? And I'd say in the DIY world, there's not really that many people that do that. Don't really do in-wall speakers unless you build your box into the wall.
Well, and that's different from buying in-wall speakers and installing them yourself, right? I would still classify that as DIY, but again, not many people are going to be building an in-wall speaker. Most people are going to build a traditional box and sit on the floor.
Yeah, well, I actually am working on plans. When I say working on plans, I do not have the parts yet. It's working in my head on some plans where they can actually go in between studs in the wall, but they may not go all the way in. But it would be more for someone that wants to build a theater and don't want their speakers sticking out, 6 inches. Instead, they'll be sticking out 2 or 3 inches. So
I'll tell you, what I'd like to see is I'd like to see a DIY situation that could compete with Sonos as far as like home theaters setup. So you build your sound bar, you get your sub, and you can buy an amp that can power the rears and match it all up. And didn't you guys test the amp that was similar to that? The
Arylic, but the problem with the Arylic still is that it doesn't do surround sound. So you're wanting it to do surround sound. And the Arylic, I think, is genius for DIY people that want whole house audio. It's a fantastic option. It's inexpensive too. I have a ton of videos on them. Justin has a video on the 2.1 amp, and you liked yours, right, Justin?
I did. It was okay. After having worked with that little amp kit, I would rather have had the standalone unit that I wouldn't have to actually try to build a box around. I still need to make a video building it into a case. And again, the problem with that one is it won't do surround sound, right? Whereas Sonos actually can. Is that right, Rob? It can actually do surround rear speakers?
Right. Yes.
And I want to say Sony has one that'll do that. Does Parts Express carry anything that'll do that?
No, and I mean that's where I think DIY would be awesome if someone built an amplifier and also sold units that would connect, that would send it the correct rear signal. Of course, my assumption, I haven't really studied the Sonos. My assumption is almost that the rear speakers probably are not true rear surround, but more like a matrix surround, probably. I don't know that. That's just a guesstimate based off of them, but that would be an assumption of mine. Although they could, if they have the HDMI in there, they could send the signal to it if they have, the right decoder in it.
Yeah, I think the Sonos is a true rear, but they're like some of the cheaper ones. I'm sure it's not a true rear surround setup. But I assume in DIY you'd have to have 2 amps, one for the sound bar itself, and then one that could speak directly to the subwoofer amp.
Well, I think the problem is, and you can do wireless subwoofers. Dayton has a way to do that. That's called the Dayton Wavelink. But I think the problem with the rear, and you could actually do rear surround the way you're looking at it with the Dayton Wavelink if you have a receiver that has the pre-outs on it, but not very many people have those anymore because receiver manufacturers have been getting rid of those a lot, except on their really high-end ones. I mean, I would rather just wire it anyway. But yeah, I think the main issue with something like that would be getting licensing from Dolby or DTS or whoever.
Well, speaking of them, like home theater receivers, they have the nastiest remotes in history. And Harmony recently said they're not going to make, or Logitech recently said they're not going to continue making Harmony remotes. How do you think that's going to affect, that situation?
I don't think it's going to have an effect. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Joseph.
I don't know. My Harmony remote that I've had for forever bit the dust a couple of months ago, and now we're back to where's the giant pile of remote controls at? And so it's a bit of a pain, but I'm looking at what they're priced out at now, and it's a little bit pricey for a remote control. The one that I had, the Logitech Harmony, was under $100. It wasn't that bad, but they've amped up in price. They seem to all want to go to an app on a tablet or a phone instead of a remote control. And then, you got to dig your phone out. And I don't know about y'all, but when I sit down to watch TV at night, my phone battery's dead and I got to go put it on a charger somewhere.
I hate the tablet and phone interface for controlling a TV. Chromecast, that's the reason why I think Chromecast kind of failed, because it's an absolute disaster, because sometimes it'll lose connection and now you can't control the thing at all. And there's basically no way to shut it off.
That's not cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had two Harmonies. I had the very first Harmony I got was the one that looked like a tablet. I can't remember it, but it looked like a tablet. It sat on a little charger. I still have it somewhere. It stopped working really. And the thing that was hard with that, which is the same problem with what you're talking about with tablets, is there's no muscle memory to it, right? Like you have a remote control like this, for example, you have a remote control. There's muscle memory of where the button is that you're pushing. You can feel it and be like, oh, all right, this is volume up, this is volume down, whatever. And sometimes they even have little, nibs or whatever on it or nipples or whatever, where you can tell what button it is. But on like a touchscreen, I know I went there. On a touchscreen, you don't have that at all. So I get frustrated with that too, but I don't think it's going to make a big difference. And here's the reason why I don't think it's going to make a big difference. It's because of HDMI eARC. I mean, I think once HDMI eARC really takes over, if everything happens the way it's supposed to, everything should communicate as supposed to, and you should only have to use whatever one remote control you have anyway. So I think Logitech was kind of smart with getting out when they did. Maybe a few years earlier.
Okay, explain that to me. What is this? HDMI what?
eARC. It's basically just a way for, like, when you plug up your TV to your sound system, now when you press your volume button, it turns up the volume of your sound system versus your TV, and vice versa, and your play button goes to whatever.
Basically makes every remote a universal remote at that point. Yeah,
to a large degree. It's supposed to, if it works correctly and everything. I don't have a lot of hands-on experience with it. It's the same thing with Harmony, the ARC. I mean, if you have ARC, if you have HDMI ARC, you know what I'm talking about. And if you press the power off on, your receiver, it shuts off your TV, all those types of things. Well, eARC is Enhanced Audio Return Channel. That's correct.
Yeah, and I can just use the worst. This is probably the worst remote ever, but the little Apple TV remote from not this newest one that come out, but the other one where you can never know which direction it's supposed to be in. But I can use it to control everything, including the little Polk sound bar. So it's not too bad.
Well, and SFFV brought up a good point too. He said, a lot of them are being voice controlled now, and I love that, and it's true. But like Harmony and those other remote, they don't have that. And I don't know how we got on this, because this has very little to do, I guess, with the future of DIY. But you need a remote control if you're gonna do a universal remote control. It has to have voice control on it for all that stuff. And I guess that's what your Amazon and Google devices are trying to do.
All voice control in every form. It's terrible.
Well,
I'm not down with it.
I like search. I like searching with voice control.
No, I like the voice control. I like to text by talking to my phone. My kids make fun of me when I do that. Why are you talking to your phone, Dad? Because I don't like texting. I'm an old man.
Yeah.
Let's bring it back to DIY. And I've got a question for y'all. I mentioned earlier that a good thing to do is to take a look at technology in the past and see how it changed DIY.
Oh yeah.
Or didn't, and why not? And there's a couple of pieces of technology that have emerged in the last, I don't know, let's say decade, that I thought when these things popped up that it would have completely changed, and more people would jump into DIY. And that is 3D printing, CNC machines, and computer controlled laser cutters like a Glowforge that people can buy and own in their house. And I thought these things were going to take off, and people would start buying them and building things, and the whole maker thing would really take off. But that really hasn't been the case. Most people don't have that equipment.
And I think the reason why is the same reason that we started talking about at the beginning. I have a 3D printer over here, which I love, and I have a CNC that I don't like very much. But here's the problem. The problem is the makers try to make it affordable for you to come in. It's the same thing that happened with 3D televisions. They try to make it affordable. You have to have it, etc. And by doing it, they make the product not good. And so there's so many bad ones out on the market. It's really hard to find a good one. So like my 3D printer, which I like, is the Ender 5. That is made really, really well. My first 3D printer, terrible. Everyone it was the ANET A6. Awful print. If you wanted to work on it all the time and finally get it to a stage within a year or two of where it would finally print really well or decently, sure. But out of the box, and I think a lot of people did, they bought these things that everyone's like, oh, this is really good. And then if they started printing on it, they're like, this stinks. And you're like, yep. And I would say the same. I just bought a brand new CNC because I realized from this one what the limitations of this were and what I needed and what I should have got the first time.
Yeah, and I think the 3D printing thing, what happened was people were like, oh, I can print anything with these, and that was what was pitched. But they didn't understand, you can if you can program the software to do that. So what happened is 90% of the people that bought these would just go to Thingiverse and print off little tchotchkes, and that's all that 3D printer ever did its whole life. And then there's 10% of people that actually dove in and learned how to use it and actually do something with it.
And that right there, I think, is the reason the 3D printer didn't revolutionize DIY in all aspects, whether it's audio or just anything. Because in order to really make, I don't know, a speaker pod with a 3D printer, you've got to become a 3D printer nerd. And it's like 3D printers are cool, but I don't want to go and learn how to use one more thing where I'm sitting in front of the computer. I'm already spending hours editing videos. Really, one more thing that I've got to spend hours trying to figure out how to set up and use and make work.
And it's not just that. You have to learn how to CNC program it, right? So you have to learn how. Well, I'm sorry, I said CNC. You have to learn the design program software, whatever program you use. A lot of people do use, computer aided software, some type of CAD program to program that. That also costs money if you want a good one. It's not free. And then on top of that, then you have to learn all the settings inside the 3D printer. Why is it not printing right now? Is it something I did in that program? Is it something I did here? And so you're right. It's not an easy thing to do. And I think you're right. I think if DIY is to succeed or become or flourish, it needs to be easier. So like those DSP boards that I mentioned from Dayton with Sigma Studios, amazing. I don't think they're going to do as well as like the DSP-LF, because the DSP-LF anyone can buy and do. Where, the other one, I think,
makes a difference. If it's not easy, people aren't gonna make it happen. Yes, Scott. Allergies have hit me since Saturday. They've been running down the back of my throat. But yeah, I get a little program, little Eddie Vedder going.
So the issue is that the 3D printer is either cheap and crappy or expensive, and therefore not worth it for a hobbyist, and they're all too hard to use.
No, I don't think that there's some very good values. I think it's just hard to figure out which one are the good values. I would say almost any Ender product is a good value typically. Ender 3, Ender 5, Ender 10, whatever print base.
How much is an Ender 5 going to cost?
About $300.
Okay, it's not too bad.
No, I mean, but then there's the filament and then all that stuff.
Right.
So there's things to learn, and you still have to level the bed and stuff, but it's even then it's still not like when you get your 3D printer. The thing that I loved about the Ender 5 is it was almost completely assembled. There was a couple things I needed to do. I was up and running in about 30 minutes, and I printed off my first piece, and it worked. Still have to level the bed, which it just comes with little adjustments on the bottom. I mean, it was actually it was the first time I had a 3D printer where I felt like, okay, yeah, now I know that the issues are probably going to be program related over this, and I felt good about it. Right.
Rob, have you got a 3D printer or anything like that?
Nope. I've thought about. Actually wanted to get a laser. That's what I wanted. Not the Glowforge. I would love to have one, but those, as you probably know, are very expensive. But the small, I wouldn't mind having a smaller one just to do, put my logo on plexiglass or wood or just something fun like that.
There's some less expensive lasers you can find on Amazon for around $300 that I don't think I'd want to use them for doing a lot of cutting of thin material. I don't think they're strong enough, but they'd be great for the engraving like I did for the project, or like you said, your logo. I see you got some logos back there that look like they've been laser cut behind you, Rob.
Yeah, I think this was sent to me, and I think this is the cream etching on glass. But it looks pretty good.
Yeah, and I would say that I do think the future will go more towards computer aided machining, whatever that is, whether it be. See, I do think it will for a lot of people.
Yeah, but the thing is, I think about a Glowforge. A top of the line Glowforge is everything you need: the filter, the special charcoal filter, and stuff that you're supposed to get. That's going to set you back $5,000. You're not going to spend $5,000 on a tool that you just use occasionally, or that you are only going to make a few things here and there. When you drop $5,000 on a piece of equipment like that, unless you just got money to burn, you're going to be in the world of production where you've got to try to make things and sell to get your money back.
Yeah, I'm trying to find. My friend Jeff just bought a CNC off of Amazon, and it was like $200, and it's slow. I mean, anytime you buy something that cheap, it's slow. But having said that, it actually did surprisingly well for the $200. I was actually really kind of impressed with it for what it is. I thought about getting one in on the channel and and all he does is use it to engrave his speaker boxes when he's done, and I thought, hey man, that's like a great idea for a couple $100. I don't think you're cutting through 3/4 inch material necessarily with it, but just doing a little bit of engraving, make a nice little sign on it, and a couple $100. I don't know. I would.
I think people that get the CNCs with the thought that they're going to program every single box they do for the CNC is probably not realistic. If you're going to do breakdown boxes that you're going to ship flat packs or something like that, of course. But if you're doing just one-off boxes, typically, I could do it faster just with a router and a table saw. But the good thing is, once you program it once, if you want to repeat it, it's there, it's ready to go. And the one thing I don't like about the smaller CNCs is that it has no air suction. So you're using tape to hold it down. And that's it's not that, once you've been on a big CNC router with air tables, it's so delightful to use those.
Yeah.
So the CNC and the Glowforge and the 3D printer didn't revolutionize DIY audio, and probably won't.
I think it's too early. Yeah, I think it's too early. I still think that CNC will eventually help, but once again, I think that's going to only be for the really, really diehard people. like the people that are buying the really nice table saws, they're really into it. And you're probably not going to get it just for DIY audio. You're going to get it for your DIY woodworking in general. Like if you do a lot of DIY woodworking.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just I think it could go because they're not that expensive anymore. I mean, a decent 4 foot by 4 foot you can get for $3,000, which is, I mean, it's just as much as a really nice table saw.
And that's reasonable. Of course, it takes up space. Yeah, and there's one CNC machine that I'm surprised it didn't take off. It must not be very good. I forget the name of it. Well, actually, there's two of these I wanted to bring up. There's one of them that's kind of like a CNC that's like a panel saw. You know, like they have in Lowe's when you get your stuff cut down. They got a saw mounted against a wall. So there's a CNC machine that's got a couple of wheels that move cables, and you basically hang a router on this piece in the middle of it, and those wheels will move, and the router will cut, and it holds tension, and so you can cut a full 4x8 sheet on something that basically leans against a wall.
Yeah, the problem with that is there's no tolerances. Like the tolerances are pretty bad. Like it's cool to do like designs and stuff, but if you're really wanting something, because it uses like rubber bands basically across. It's not really rubber band. I don't know what I think they are. And it just it's the Maslow CNC, I think. That's
it, the Maslow, yeah. And I've noticed that they appear to bind, right? The ropes and cables, they kind of get wrapped around each other, and it's not really a good solution. And there's another one, I forget what it's called, but you've probably seen it. It's a big router that you hold on to, and you have these looks like dominoes you stick to your piece. And you program it, and you take the router and you start routing, and the router takes over, and all you got to do is get it close, and the router itself will move to get the line exactly in the right place.
But see, that's the problem that I'm talking about is like those solutions. Well, not the second one, but the first solution, the Maslow, they just try to get it cheap enough that people can buy, and then they have a bad experience with it, and they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I hate that because there's just not a lot of knowledge about there. Same with the 3D glasses on thing. I think if you're, and this too, like if you had like any experiences with really cheap buyout drivers, right? And you're like, oh man, these are terrible drivers, but they're buyout for a reason. And then when you go to like a really nice driver and you're like, oh man, this is a world of difference. I get concerned when DIY goes too cheap at times, because when it goes too cheap, then it gets concerning. I'm going to share the link to that CNC that my friend bought that I was actually pretty surprised with.
So what is that you've got again? It's what?
What? The one I got, what?
Yeah, you're going to show us something right now? What was your show?
No, I just shared the link in chat.
You shared the link in the chat. Okay. So you mentioned the buyout drivers. I had a wonderful experience with some buyout passive radiators that basically ripped themselves apart the second you used them. And so, like you said, if you go cheap, sometimes it's not worth the trouble. And one thing I've noticed doing this DIY thing is that I can buy a cheap spare speakers cheaper than I can build it, and in a whole lot less time. Where I see the real beauty of DIY, it's like you mentioned earlier, Nick, it's when you want to make something really expensive, like those THX clones that you made. Right? Those aren't cheap to make, but they're still a whole lot cheaper than buying the actual item, even used. You can build them cheaper, and that I think is where
they are cheap to make. They're only like $200 to build, so they're pretty cheap. Each one like $400 a pair.
That's a big reason why I got into it, especially with car audio. I mean, you can pay a shop and hope you find a good shop, because a really crappy shop will charge you just as much as a great shop will and do crappy work.
That's true. I mean, that's why I work when I can on my own vehicles, because if it's something I can tackle myself, I know how the work's getting done. Even if it's something I don't know, I can do the research and figure out what I need to know to get this job done. And it's like when you would get your car stereo installed, you don't know unless you go back and look what all they done to your vehicle, how they ran the wires, did they use grommets, are they looking out for pinch points and all this type of stuff. So you get the satisfaction knowing everything that is right and wrong with whatever your project entailed.
Yeah, and I would say the other good thing about the future of DIY is that we have this technology here. We have a lot more measurement tools and things of that nature, and we have a lot more knowledge that's readily available. So for people to build good products, I would say that the knowledge out there is out there for you to be able to do now. And so that lends itself really good for DIY community. Now, whether people take advantage of that, that's up to them.
Arena Rockman, I have used the sonic barrier in both forms, and I actually did an update because I heard people saying that they were having trouble with it falling off. So I showed it on the trunk lid where it hasn't fallen off in about 6 months in the Arkansas heat, which is pretty brutal. So it's been holding up so far. I'll keep doing updates every time I pull the panels off for whatever reason.
Where were we? What were we talking about before that?
I was just saying that with the amount of information that's out there, it should be easier for someone to create good. And even plans now, there's a lot of people like I sell plans and I give some plans away. And I know, Justin, you do that too. Like you should be able to build, one that's well designed if you don't have the means to do it or don't have the interest.
That is the technology that's come out that has changed DIY audio, and that's YouTube. I mean, period. The ability to sit down and watch a video, because I think about the trend of clean wires, right? The trend of, instead of putting things behind beauty panels, that's all on Dean and Fernando. It's like that trend may have been going on behind the scenes in pro shops, but that wasn't on the radar of most DIYers until their channel blew up. When people got to see how it's done, how to do it right.
Yeah, for sure.
And how many zip ties you actually need to pull that kind of work off.
1 million. That's like when I do a video, sometimes, matter of fact, a lot of times, you are learning this with me. I'm not an expert showing you. Some things I'm very comfortable with and I know, but there are a lot of things that I cover that I'm learning along with you, and that was kind of the whole purpose of doing the video.
I think that's important, and I think that's always going to be a part of my channel because you can fit everything I know about audio on the head of a pin. There's so many people out there who know so much more than I do, and I don't know when I'm going to get it edited. But I recently put together a box, just a simple sealed enclosure, just to refine my skills. Where I did some detail work on the box, and I wrapped it in vinyl, or I wrapped the front of it in vinyl, and man, those corners, they came out terrible, absolutely terrible. But I'm going to make the video and I'm going to show the mistake. And I'm going to say, you know what? So what if it wasn't perfect? It was my first time ever doing it. And if you're watching me do something on camera, it's probably the first time I've ever done it. Yeah. And
I think that's a great point. And I'm going to bring up Brian too. He said, there's a lot of rubbish on YouTube too. And he's true. There's good and there's bad videos. I don't even teach designing transmission lines because I'm not a transmission line expert. And I don't plan to be. I'm just not interested in learning that right now. Maybe someday, but right now I'm just not interested in it. But there are a lot of bad information too, and that's why you got to pick the people that you think or believe they know, or look at designs that people have built and are happy with them, like the Dynas, for example. A lot of people are happy with the Dynas if you know what you're getting for them, or the Soundstage 15s, or Paul Carmody has a lot of great ones, Overnight Sensations, the Speedsters, those types of things. You want to look for, Jeff Bagby has a lot of good ones too. You want to look for those types of designers, or you want to look for those types of designs and maybe build those if you yourself don't want to do that. But I think that's really good because back in the day, you had to kind of like maybe hope that a magazine would come out that would have a design in there that you'd want to build, or you would do what a lot of people did in the 70s and 80s, and people still do it today. They just buy drivers, buy pre-assembled crossovers, and maybe not even use an L pad, just throw it together. And I don't recommend doing that, but people do it, and yeah, but I think the ability to have much better sounding speakers is out there if you want to do DIY.
Yeah, for sure. I'd rather get all my speakers already designed and I just put them together. That's the way. There's definitely a lot of work goes into trying to figure out your crossover and all that stuff.
Yeah, and some people don't want to do that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's the reason why, these designers exist. Like I build plans for you guys so that you don't have to buy the measurement equipment. And you don't have to. I mean, if you want to, I'm still going to teach you how to use it. I do that on my channel all the time. But if you don't want to, you just want a great sounding speaker, you just go and look at some of the plans I gave away for free or sell, and you just buy them and you do it. Or you pick someone like Jeff Bagby or, Paul Carmody or someone else, and you do their designs. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's a good thing for DIY. I think that's a great thing for DIY. And I hope that becomes a really long lasting trend, because it's amazing to see what people do. I mean, like with the dynos, for example, I've been sent thousands of pictures and everyone's dynos look completely different. It's just really amazing to see, the ingenuity of what people do and how they design these. It's really cool.
I think that there is a lot to learn from a bad YouTube channel as well, or a bad YouTube video. But here's what you got to think about a YouTube channel. And this, if you've never put out a bunch of videos, you might not consider this. So once you put out a video, it's no longer your video. So your intention, the message you were trying to convey, can then be used to bash someone over the head in a Facebook group with something you didn't intend at all. Or they could say, hey, this guy's wrong. Well, that's not what I was talking about. That's the one thing, is like people put their own, every time they share a video or comment on a video, they have their own context to it. And they got the part they wanted to hear, and that's the message they're conveying, even if it doesn't align with your own message. I've had that happen to me several times.
I have too, and I'll say this too. And the DIY community is tough on YouTubers in general, and I'll tell you the reason why. Well, the reason why I think it is, a lot of people that in it are engineers, and they're very technical with their words and word choices. And if you don't use that technical word or phrase or choice, they get on you on it, even if the meaning or the message was conveyed. Because usually when you're on YouTube, you're trying to convey that message to a broad audience, someone that will understand, not just the engineers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't speak very technically for a reason, because some of the stuff I don't know the full technical terms and all this stuff, but I also speak in the common nomenclature, like how people refer to it, just because it's not technically correct. RMS power is not really the true thing we should be calling it. It should be like nominal power. But since that's what's accepted in our current reality, that's what I go with them. Yeah,
and like obviously adding polyfill doesn't actually make a box bigger, because that would defy the laws of physics, but that's what people understand. It changes the Q of the box. We get that, but if I said it changed the Q of the box, people would look at me like, what?
Yeah.
Huh?
It's funny. There was a video I was doing. I forget what it was, but it was something like that, where the box thinks it's bigger, and I actually put on the screen, a box can't actually think, it's a figure of speech. And I wonder if anyone laughed at that, because that was my intention. And I've run into that. There's the whole subsonic filter versus infrasonic filter thing. Which do you call it? Everyone calls it a subsonic filter. We all know it means infrasonic. It's not like it's that big of a deal. But it's the common language that we use. I had someone, I see Kip down in the chat, someone claiming to be from Kicker, claiming to be one of their product trainers, get on to me for calling a bandpass box a fourth order, because apparently we should call a bandpass box not a fourth order because it doesn't have a fourth order roll off. Fine, okay, it doesn't bother me that much, but it's part of it, right? Every industry does that. If you're a plumber and they buy a rubber coupling to connect two pipes together, they call it a Fernco, because that's the brand.
I just want to comment, Art Morris. That's exactly what I meant. Engineers are the problem. You got it. We figured it out. I did not. I mean, that's exactly what happens when you like speak out loud. They're like, oh, that's what you're saying. I'm like, that's not what I meant. Like, come on, man. And I think Williston Audio Labs got it right, Derek, when he said, hey, the problem is once it's up there, you can't take it down. And You can delete it. The problem with deleting it, and people just don't understand, is it messes with your YouTube channel. It really does. And there's a lot of backlog that we're not going to get into here, but it really can. And so the best thing to do is, if there's a mistake in a video, is to comment in the comment section and let you guys work that out in the comment section. And of course, sometimes we join in on that as well, especially if you think that it's a major issue, then you definitely need to do it. If I find someone that found a major issue in my video, I'll pin it to the top or create a comment myself re-explaining what was going on and pin it to the top. That way, hopefully anyone that reads the comments, that'll be the first comment they see.
Yeah. And maybe that is the future of DIY audio. Maybe the future is we have a forum where we have a back and forth, because I've learned a lot reading my comments. And about half the videos I may have made so far are just where someone made a comment and I said, that's a video idea, because people need to know about that.
Yeah, and it's go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the community plays a big factor in this, because there is a lot of great ideas out there in the chats on our live stream, in the comments on the videos. And, you know, some of them, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that because that would be very hard or obtuse to do. But this other comment, yeah, sure. I mean, this seems pretty easy. It seems like things people want to know. So you do get a lot of good knowledge from the community in general.
And I agree with Jesse. It's not easy to make YouTube videos. I don't think a lot of people feel like it is. And it's really easy to misspeak and not catch it when editing. And if you don't have someone else in your house, like I don't have anyone else in my household that speaks my language. So if I'm talking about capacity, I mean, at times I've called a resistor a capacitor and all kinds of things. Not because I don't know the difference, just because that's where my brain was when I was talking about it. I don't know. And I didn't catch it in editing. I didn't catch it. And I'm like, oh. And then one video I recorded and I called the product the wrong name. It was a really simple mistake. It was the how to DIY hi-fi and amplifier. And so I just mentioned in the front of the video, hey, I mistakenly called it this. This is the actual one. And someone said, well, you should have re-recorded the whole video. I'm like, dude, do you know how hard it was to record that the first time? That took me like 3 days. I'm not re-recording.
I've done that today. I was editing this video Saturday night at midnight, and I usually never edit that late. I always go to sleep. But I was editing, getting it all done, and I called the Rockford Fosgate 225, an Orion 225. Oh. Derek pointed out, and I was like, I don't care, whatever. But so far, no one has noticed it. Derek noticed it. He was the first one to watch it, first one to notice it. And I'm surprised that nobody noticed it yet.
You know, speaking of the comments, I see that Brian Steele is in the comments, and Brian's commenting on some of my videos, and I'm trying to put two and two together. I think Brian has a website that's one of the best subwoofer resources out there. Brian, if I've got that right, type your website into the chat if you're who I think you are. So lots of good resources out there. It's not just the stuff that I'm on right. If you recall the nut of bolt, it happens. People make mistakes. People use CCA wire when they use OFC.
Yeah. Well, that's like Scott. He said he knows it. You get what I mean. Like if we were all in a group and you're like, and you're pointing your finger like, haha, you said Orion. Just get one of those slap in the back. It's like, you know what I meant, dummy. Quit trying to be a smart guy.
And so, guys, look at the time. And before we go, I want y'all to. I'm considering doing some rebranding on my channel, and again, it ties into this discussion. Some of our commenters on the channels tell us these interesting things, and apparently, I have a celebrity lookalike, or I had one. He passed away recently, and so, guys, if you real quick, I just want to share a screen real quick, and I'm thinking about doing a complete rebranding here.
Oh no, is it going to be the Devil's Rejects guy?
On this one right here. And so can y'all go ahead and pull that up? Guys, do I need to start wearing the clown makeup, and do I need to start doing like Captain Spaulding themed branding on my channel? Do I look like Sid Haig? And I would consider it a compliment because Sid's a bit of a badass.
Not on Sound Advice, but yeah.
What do you think? Is there a resemblance?
Well, Nick was talking about a Halloween show a while back, so yeah.
I did mention that. I thought that'd be a cool show.
What do you think? Is there a resemblance? If a beard get a little bit rough and
let's go with it. I can't get them side by side, but you're gonna have to shave your beard up a lot.
I'm telling you, when you're on YouTube, you're gonna get a lot of comments about looking like I get comments a lot for looking like Seth Rogen for some reason. I don't see it.
You favor Seth Rogen a little bit.
No, he favors me if anything. So let's just get that right.
I think Seth Rogen is your celebrity lookalike.
Yeah.
But who's Rob's celebrity lookalike?
Tom Cruise, I think.
Tom Cruise.
Is that who y'all said it was?
For you? I had actually said, who's that guy that played Uncle Fester again?
Oh no. I don't know his name actually.
I can't. No, actually, I think actually who played Uncle Fester was Christopher Lloyd, actually, now that I think about it.
Was it really?
I think so.
It was Christopher Lloyd. Yeah. You don't look like Christopher Lloyd. I'm sorry.
No, before we sign out, so we said it early. I'll say it now that everyone's in here. So I am leaving the show as a host. I'll be back as a guest. But not this show. We'll have 1, 2, 3 more shows after this. And that will be my final show when it rotates back around to me as a host. But I'll be back on. I know I want to do another friendly competition or build off with these guys. And, maybe we can talk Kip into doing something with that.
Yeah, who knows?
The last build off, I got my ass handed to me, so I'm not sure if I want to do it again.
I have some amazing ideas. They're just going to blow your mind for the next builds.
You went all out on first one, so I kind of.
There we go.
Yeah.
I don't have any ideas. I did my only idea on the first build. I'm completely out of ideas.
I'm out of ideas. That's baloney. I don't believe you. Wait, let me just say this real quick before we go. One of the things, and I'll tell you, this is a great place. There's some great places to get inspiration, I think. Museums are good ones. And I don't mean like a museum, but I mean like more like a cultural museum where they go through like the different genres and ages, things like that, like American history style museums. Antique stores. Fantastic way looking at like old antique things, whether it be 1800s all the way up to like the 60s, 70s. Some people are even saying the 80s are antique now, so I guess we are antique. And then also if you ever go out to like auctions or flea markets, there's some other great places to get some ideas, I think.
All right, that's a very good. I have the perfect way to end the show. Are you guys ready for it?
Yeah.